I requested every document from the National Archives that had her name or the other name on it, and they sent me a huge package of stuff, and I'm going through all this stuff and reading her testimony. And as you notice on the handout that I gave you on her testimony, it says, she's asked by Mr. Purdy, how did you determine what to illustrate for the select committee? She says, well, this was done by consultation, the staff of the committee, the medical panel, myself, and myself. She made that decision, that's rather odd, and it was decided that the photographs taken at the autopsy should be copied to illustrate the position of the wounds. And we all know the story. They didn't want to put the autopsy photographs on public display, so they have Ida come in, who is, interesting when you read everything about, I have the contracts, how much they paid her, and this woman made a ton of bucks for this, let me tell you. Said the photographs that were selected were the ones that best showed the injuries. That's not true. They weren't the ones that best showed the injuries at all. And then he says, what photographs did you attempt to copy? 4 photographs. One that shows the back of the head, that we've seen. Another one shows the upper back, that we've seen, and she cleaned that up a little bit. The side of the head, we have not, I've never seen that one, maybe you have, I've never seen it. And the front of the neck, that one we have seen. Interesting. Turn the page over to the next page. And where Mr. Purdy says, why was it necessary to use duplicates? And she gives this idea about, well, she didn't want to bug the people at the National Archives and things like that. I'm going to stave off the very seductive temptation to talk about the back of the head photograph, because that is just outrageous when you, and we've all seen it. I'm not really saying a whole lot new today, but sometimes just rehashing some of the elder stuff is interesting. But turn to the next part where it says Ida Doc questions and answers. These were obviously questions prepared ahead of time that they prepped Ida with, one of which, how did you determine what to draw? Duplicate the autopsy photographs which show the key wound areas. Again, simply not true. And I'll let you read that on yourself and how she took away blood that was on the skin and things like that. Now, it really gets interesting. In the process of requesting all these documents, they sent me other documents. This is one that is from Dr. Michael Baden, who we all love. And every time I see Michael Baden, I just wish he was my father. He's such a wonderful human being, isn't he? I'm sincere. I'm not trying to be funny. He really is a wonderful human being. It says, summary of contact. Called to remind Dr. Baden that he agreed to obtain various photographs of typical bullet wounds in people and clothing, as well as x-rays for our medical report. And I read that and I thought to myself immediately, why? Why would you need pictures of in-shoot or out-shoot bullet wounds if Ida Docs has the original autopsy photographs? Makes no sense to me. How can you outdo that? Well, there's another one from Michael Baden. And this is between Michael Baden and Mark Flanagan. Next visit, photos of typical in-shoot wounds. Well, flip the page again. And this is one that Dr. Robertson used the other night, where Dr. Baden is saying, Ida, you can do much better. I'm thinking, much better than what? If you have the original autopsy photographs, how can you do better than that? Why do you need pictures of bullet wounds? And in fact, Dr. Baden has stated that he doesn't deny this at all, that she was given pictures of gunshot wounds to enhance the wounds on the autopsy photographs when she went to trace them and draw them. Now, to me, there's only one explanation for that. Keep turning the pages, and you see some, maybe the poorest photocopies ever of the back of the head photograph, and the Doc's drawing as well. And you'll have to get these on your own. And if you want to see mine, I have better copies of that I've gotten from Walt Brown and Gary Aguilar. But when you look, and we can argue all day, where's the bullet wound? And Dr. Robertson strongly suggests there's some very good evidence that there were 2 wounds. And so I think the problem is the HSCA found themselves in this either-or kind of Kierkegaardian quagmire of I either have to choose the one up close, not exactly in the colic area, or the one down by the EOP. Well, they realize there's this huge massive damage done on the right side of Kennedy's head, and I think they probably realized, well, if Oswald or anyone else is behind Kennedy shooting and the bullet's going downward from 60 feet in the air, then it's a good probability that it's not going to emit itself or exit itself right here. So when in doubt, let's just throw the wound up 4 inches or 10 centimeters. It's interesting in Humes' testimony. I think Humes really is misrepresented on what he said before the HSCA, but I don't want to get ahead of myself. But when you look at the wound that Ida Docs puts there, it is obviously not the wound in the back of the head photograph. That is obviously enhanced to strongly suggest. In fact, when you see it, especially on the color photograph of the back of the head wound, I'm not sure what it is, to be quite honest with you. I really don't know. It could be anything from a blood droplet. It may be a bullet wound. I don't know. What I'm simply saying is that either or quagmire that they found themselves in, I think, led them to make a decision to explain the exit wound on the right side of the head, and that's why they had Ida Doc have pictures of gunshot wounds to enhance the back of the head photograph to support their theory. Now, I don't want to imply that that is sinister, but I'm going to imply to you this morning that is a little sinister to me. If you're moving stuff around like that, that just reeks of some type of sinister activity. You say, well, that's a little strong. Well, okay, maybe strong. If you can come up with a synonym that beats that, I'm all ears. Turn to the next page, which this was attached to the previous memoranda that I read, which comes from the Medical Legal Investigation of Death book. Again, showing that they gave her pictures of gunshot wounds. I'm not making this up. They actually had that. Although when I called Ida Docs on the phone and I asked her point blank, she denied everything. She said they never gave her pictures of that. She never had copies of the autopsy photographs. I read from her testimony what she said. I did have copies, and she denied everything, got really annoyed with me, and told me never to call her again. So I waited 2 weeks. I called her again. And she again, denied everything. And I was emailing friends at the time, you're picking on that little old lady, whatever. And I said, well, to me this is important. Ida Docs just flat out lied to me every question that I asked her. Okay. This is from, I think it's volume 7 from the HSCA on page 106 and 107. And I will read this. It says, all members of the panel agree that the upper scalp wound, the location of which is identified by x-rays as approximately 10 centimeters as measured on the x-ray above the external occipital protuberance, is a typical entrance wound. All concur in a striking similarity to the entrance wound in the upper back. I'm not sure how you came to that conclusion, but all agree that the white material is a piece of brain tissue and that it has no relationship to the location of the entrance wound, despite the interpretation of the autopsy pathologist. Now, I'm going to get into this with Humes, but think about that. Whatever you think of Humes, whatever you think of Boswell, they were not forensic pathologists. Granted, they were hospital pathologists. They were with that skull for 8 hours, for goodness sakes. Every day you do an autopsy on the President of the United States of America? I can understand if it's me, they may forget that. Who cares? But on John Kennedy, you're going to blunder and forget where the entrance was? I just don't believe that. I mean, for goodness sakes, Humes was with Tom Robinson, the mortician, putting the head back together and cleaning it up to put it back in the casket. I can't believe Humes forgot where it was. Now, let's go to Dr. Humes and his testimony, which is a few pages. I'm not obviously covering everything. There's no way that I possibly can. But go to Humes' testimony, and I want you to read exactly what he said, which you really have to watch Humes on video to really see how he handles this. He is annoyed. He doesn't want to be there. It's obvious. And he is an upset man before the HSCA. On page 327, Cornwell says, now I would like to ask you today if you had at least a greater opportunity to look at the photographs along the lines that I have just indicated to you, and if, after doing so, you have a more well-considered or a different opinion, or whether your opinion is still the same as to where the point of entry is. I mean, if you think about how preposterous that is to begin with. Excuse me, Humes, take a look at an 8x10, because I'm sure that's going to be more probative and evidentiary than the actual skull itself. Well, here's what Humes says. Yes, I think that I do have a different opinion. Hello? Number one, it was a casual kind of discussion that we were having. That is simply not true. It was not a casual kind of discussion they were having. You can read that in the HESC Volume 7 as well. With the panel members, as I do recall it. Number two, and I think before we talk about these photographs further, if I might comment, and now he's going to, segue right out of these photographs were made on the evening of November 22nd, 1963. I first saw any of these photographs on November 1st, 1966, almost 3 years after the photographs were made. He didn't answer the question. He just got out of it. Next page. Actually, I'm going to skip that and go to page just above 330 on the handout. This really gets into it. Cornwell says, your initial autopsy report indicated, as you have just stated, the wound was indeed above. I believe the report is worded in terms of slightly above the external occipital protuberance. The testimony today indicates that the panel places that at approximately 10 centimeters, which is about 4 inches, above the external occipital protuberance. Would that discrepancy be explainable? And Humes, you really have to see this on video to appreciate. Well, I have a little trouble with that. 10 centimeters is a significant 4 inches. And then Cornwell just avoids any other contact with that and just gets right out of there. So Humes, while initially seems to suggest that he has had time to think about it and there may be a problem with it, now kind of says, well, that is a little too high. A little? When you understand that the average skull is only about 100 millimeters, he missed it by 5/6 of the football field. I guess that is a little bit.